When a statue of Mary Seacole is unveiled on Thursday, many will see it as righting a serious wrong and celebrating a black woman whose place in history was forgotten.
Now, a few won't be celebrating, though, as they say that her role has been exaggerated. David Olusogo goes in search of the truth.
In 2004, a national campaign was launched to identify the most important black people in British history. At the top of the list was a woman who many people had never heard of.
Now, who's the greatest black Briton of them all? Well, the winner announced today is Mary Seacole.
Mary Seacole was a Jamaican woman who nursed injured and wounded soldiers during the Crimean War back in the middle of the 19th century. She's buried here in Kensal Green in London, and until she won that poll back in 2004, this was one of the only memorials to her.
Since the poll brought her back into British consciousness, Mary Seacole has been added to the national curriculum, celebrated with a blue plaque on her former home in London, and now a statue is being erected in her honour. But the story of Mary Seacole has also unleashed conflict and controversy.
Because Mary Seacole made her name in the Crimean War, she has, perhaps inevitably, been compared to Florence Nightingale.
And there are those today who claim that her contribution wasn't significant enough to merit a place in our history books. So what is the truth about Mary Seacole? Historian Helen Rappaport has been researching Seacole's work in the Crimea at the Wellcome Library in London.
Well, she set up this general store, but more importantly, she also ran a kind of informal clinic. So anyone who felt unwell could go and get a dose of medicine for their stomach upsets or have a wound stitched or even a bullet removed. She could certainly do those things.
Was she a qualified nurse?
Well, of course not, because it was Florence Nightingale who instituted training for nurses after the Crimean War. She was a nurse in the kind of more broad sense of a caregiver, someone who mopped the fevered brow.
We know about Mary Seacole's impact in the Crimea because British soldiers wrote about her in their journals and letters home.
This is from the journal of William Cattle, a British medical officer. He says, her fame as a doctress for cholera and diarrhoea are spread all over the camp. And the extraordinary thing you find with Mary Seacole in the Crimea is if there was one person everyone knew, it was Mary Seacole.
The medicines Mary Seacole used on the British soldiers she treated were traditional herbal remedies from the Caribbean, learned at her mother's knee.
Great, thank you. Now, this actually was a key ingredient that Mary used, cinnamon bark. She would grind it, pound it with a pestle and mortar, boil it up with water and sweeten it then with guava jelly or something like that. The other things she used were fruits like guava and pomegranate. So it really was these liquids that were her fundamental treatment for things like dysentery and enteric disease.
Seacole's remedies were famed for their effectiveness, but over the years she was gradually forgotten.
When most people think of the Crimean War, they think of Florence Nightingale, a figure who's far more famous.
Well, no one can take away from the extraordinary reputation of Florence Nightingale. She was a true pioneer. They were two very different women. Mary was her own woman with her own unique Jamaican methods.
Mary was forgotten for almost a century. Now, there's many black figures in British history who were written out of our national story. Do you think race played a part in Mary's disappearance?
Well, it must have played some part, but I don't see it as a really active forgetting. I think the huge problem with Mary is we have no paper trail, so it was an oral history. And once Mary died, it was more a forgetting than, I think, an active, racist, deliberate desire to eradicate her from history.
Mary Seacole is the first named black woman to be honoured with a statue in Britain. She may still be compared to Florence Nightingale, but her place in British history now seems assured.
I think we should remember Mary Seacole in her own right and for her own achievements. Both she and Florence Nightingale made unique contributions, but there's plenty of room in our historic memory of the Crimean War for both of them.